I remember that night like it was yesterday. The rain tapping against the window, soft but steady, almost like it was trying to warn me. The room was dimly lit, the kind of quiet that hums louder than any noise. He stood there, in that half-light, looking at me with those same brown eyes that once made me believe in everything good in this world. And then he said it, the line that would echo in my head for weeks afterward. "I've changed. You can trust me again." His voice was calm, warm, almost trembling, like he was holding back tears. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that maybe, just maybe, people could change if they lost something real. But something inside me didn't buy it. Maybe it was the tone, too practiced. Maybe it was the way his hands fidgeted. Or maybe it was because deep down, I knew what he was capable of. Still, I smiled. That soft, practiced kind of smile you give when you already know the truth, but don't want to reveal it yet. Because love, when it's been bruised and bent, has this strange way of making you blind. You start ignoring the cracks in the mirror because you're too focused on the reflection you wish was still there. We had already been through hell together. Lies, secrets, and that one betrayal that almost destroyed everything I had built with him. The night I found out what he'd done, I told myself I'd never look back. But time is cruel. It blurs pain. It makes you remember laughter louder than heartbreak. And when he came back, whispering apologies and promises like poetry, I wanted to believe that this was the redemption story people write songs about. He told me he couldn't sleep without me, that every morning felt empty, that he was ready to fix what he broke. His words were careful, crafted, and for a second, I felt that familiar ache in my chest. The part of me that still missed the version of him I fell for. He begged for forgiveness, tears glistening under that warm light. He looked like a man desperate for redemption. And maybe, in that moment, I was desperate too. Not for him, but for closure. So I smiled, and I said the words he wanted to hear. I forgive you. But that night, forgiveness wasn't real. It was strategy. I wasn't forgiving him. I was setting the stage. Because when someone betrays you once, it breaks your heart. When they do it twice, it wakes something else inside you. Something colder, sharper, patient. That night, as he wrapped his arms around me, whispering how grateful he was, I didn't feel warmth. I felt calculation. He thought my silence meant peace. He didn't realize it meant planning. I had learned from the first time. Never confront a liar when he's ready to lie again. Instead, you let him talk. You listen. You let him believe he's rebuilding your trust, while you quietly build a story of your own. So I stayed. I stayed not because I loved him, but because I wanted to see how far he would go, when he thought I was too naive to notice. I watched the way he smiled when he texted someone late at night. I noticed how he turned his phone face down when I walked into the room. I kept track of every small detail, every twitch, every excuse, and all the while, he thought we were healing. It's strange, isn't it? How people think forgiveness means forgetting. He didn't understand that real forgiveness isn't about wiping the slate clean. It's about keeping it spotless long enough for the truth to reveal itself. He believed I had moved on from his betrayal. But the truth was, I was memorizing every move he made since that night. As he talked about second chances and new beginnings, I was already thinking about endings. Not dramatic ones, not violent ones, but quiet ones. The kind that makes someone realize what they lost, only after it's gone forever. That was my plan. Not to scream, not to fight, but to let him destroy himself in the comfort of his own lies. There's a certain power in pretending. Pretending to forgive, pretending to trust, pretending to love. He didn't realize that every smile I gave him was measured. Every word I spoke was deliberate. I wasn't trying to rebuild anything. I was waiting for the moment when the mask he wore would finally slip. People like him never change. They just learn to hide better. But the thing about lies is that they always need more lies to survive. And sooner or later, the weight of them becomes too heavy to carry. And when that moment comes, when he finally stumbles under the pressure of his own deceit, that's when the truth bursts out, raw and undeniable. That's when the performance ends. That night, after he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain. Each drop felt like a countdown. My mind was calm, almost unnervingly so. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was clear. Cold maybe, but clear. I turned to look at him. Peaceful, unaware, dreaming perhaps, about the version of himself he wanted me to believe in. And in that quiet moment, I whispered something only I could hear. You'll never see it coming, because I had already decided. This time, I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my pain. I would give him something else. The illusion of safety. The comfort of false forgiveness. I would let him believe the storm had passed while I quietly gathered the lightning. Revenge, I've learned, doesn't come from rage. It comes from patience. It's not about screaming your pain into someone's face. It's about standing silently while they think they've won. It's about letting them talk themselves into their own downfall. As I closed my eyes that night, I felt something inside me shift. Like a door closing forever. The woman who once begged for his honesty was gone. In her place stood someone new. Calm, deliberate, unshaken. He thought my forgiveness was weakness. He didn't realize it was bait. He thought he had control again. But he didn't know I was already holding the script. And while he slept beside me, breathing easy, dreaming of redemption, I whispered one last thought to myself. Not out of hate, but clarity. Let the show begin. We started fresh, or at least, that's what he believed. He called it a new beginning, a clean slate, as if the past could be erased just because he said sorry. We went back to our morning coffees together, sitting across from each other, pretending everything was normal. He'd talk about random things, work, the weather, his friends. And I'd nod, smile, laugh at the right times. From the outside, we looked perfect, like the couple that had survived the storm and come out stronger. But inside, I knew better. Happiness is easy to fake when both people are wearing masks. At first, it felt strange being around him again. There was this awkward politeness between us, like two strangers learning how to dance again. He'd compliment me out of nowhere, hold my hand a little longer, talk about how much he appreciated the second chance. And each time, I would smile and say, I'm glad we're trying. But behind that calm voice, my mind was working differently now. I wasn't healing. I was watching. I was taking notes on every move, every change, every hesitation. Every time he laughed, I watched closely. Every time he smiled, I analyzed it. And every time he touched my hand, I felt the ghost of his lies still clinging to my skin. The warmth of his palm didn't comfort me anymore. It reminded me of the same hands that once betrayed me. He didn't notice, of course. He thought I was just quiet, reflective, maybe still cautious. But I wasn't cautious. I was calculating. He tried so hard to prove himself. Texts in the morning, random "I love you" messages in the afternoon. Little surprises to show that he cared. At first, it was almost convincing. Almost. But people like him can't stay consistent for long. The guilt fades. The effort dies. And soon, their true nature starts to slip through the cracks again. One night, I noticed something small. The kind of detail most people would ignore. He started keeping his phone close, always face down. At dinner, he'd glance at it when he thought I wasn't looking. The light would blink, and his expression would shift, just slightly. He'd smile at me right after, that same fake calm smile he used to wear before everything fell apart the first time. That's when the déjà vu hit, sharp and familiar. I had seen this exact pattern before, lived through it, cried because of it. And here it was again, like a bad movie on repeat. But this time, I didn't confront him. I didn't ask, "Who's that?" Or, "Why are you hiding your phone?" No, I just let him dig his own hole. Because when you want to expose someone's true nature, the smartest thing you can do is pretend you don't know. Let them feel safe. Let them think their lies are working. It's in that false comfort where they get careless. And that's when they reveal everything. He thought my forgiveness was genuine, that my quietness was peace. But it wasn't. It was observation. He didn't realize that every word he said was being weighed in my mind. Every inconsistency, every contradiction, I stored it away. And while he believed we were rebuilding trust, I was building a case. Days passed, and the patterns became clearer. The late replies, the short answers, the unexplained absences. He'd talk about working late, but I'd see the reflection of neon lights in his car when he called. The kind of lights you don't find in an office. I started memorizing the times he left and the excuses he gave. I didn't even need proof yet. I just needed confirmation of what I already knew deep down. There was one night that sealed it for me. He came home late, said his friend needed help with something urgent. His shirt smelled different, not of his cologne, but of someone else's perfume. Soft, floral, unfamiliar. I stood there as he talked, explaining things I didn't ask about. He kissed my forehead, told me I worried too much, and went to shower. I watched him walk away and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. I had finally stopped feeling anything for him. He still thought I loved him. That was his biggest mistake. What he didn't know was that my silence wasn't love. It was a trap, and he was walking straight into it, smiling. Every time he hugged me, I could almost hear the echo of his lies whispering between us. But I didn't flinch. I didn't show pain. I knew that reacting too soon would ruin everything. I had to wait. I had to let him believe this second chance was real. I started keeping track of more things. His mood swings, his tone, the way he avoided eye contact when certain names came up. I became so good at pretending that even I started to believe the act sometimes. That's the thing about deception. When you play it long enough, it becomes part of you. But I didn't mind. This wasn't about revenge yet. This was about understanding just how deep his lies could go when he thought no one was watching. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at him and wondering, does he even realize how obvious he's become? The way he'd lock his phone when I walked into the room. The way his smile would stiffen when I asked about his day. It was all so predictable, and I couldn't help but think how strange it was that he still believed he was smarter than me. I let him believe that. I wanted him to. Because the only thing more satisfying than catching a liar is watching him dig his own grave with his confidence. He had no idea I was already planning how to expose him. I wasn't going to shout or throw things or beg him to tell me the truth. No. I was going to let him destroy himself with his own behavior, so I smiled. Every day, I cooked for him, laughed at his stories, played the part of the forgiving partner perfectly. The more comfortable he got, the less careful he became. He stopped hiding the lies completely, like he thought I'd never question him again. That was my confirmation. The moment I knew I was ready. Because pretending not to know isn't weakness. It's power. Real power. It's the quiet before the collapse. And I could already feel it coming. The tension, the secrets, the inevitable explosion that he thought he could avoid. But I was done running. This time, I wouldn't be the one breaking down when the truth surfaced. This time, I'd be standing still, watching him fall apart. The past wasn't knocking anymore. It was kicking down the door. And when it finally crashed open, I promised myself I wouldn't even blink. I'd just stand there, calm, steady, and let him see what happens when the person you betrayed learns how to play your game better than you ever could. It's funny how easily people fall back into their old habits. No matter how many promises they make, how many tears they shed, the truth always crawls back to the surface. With him, it started so subtly that most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. I noticed everything. A shift in tone when he spoke. The way his phone stayed closer to him, always face down. The half-second delay before he answered a simple question. It was the same script, just performed with a little more confidence this time. Like he believed he'd perfected the act. He thought my silence meant peace. That I was finally over the past. That I was rebuilding what we once had. But silence, when it comes from someone who's been betrayed, isn't peace. It's planning. And I was planning, even as I smiled. Even as I pretended not to notice the lies slipping through his lips. I had learned that people who cheat your heart once will always test if they can do it again. And I was more than ready for his test. The first red flag came one evening when he told me he had to stay late at work. I didn't question it. I simply nodded, kissed his cheek, and watched him walk out the door. But hours later, when I called his office number, the receptionist casually mentioned he'd left at 6. My lips curved into a small smile. Not anger, not shock, just confirmation. The game had begun. I didn't confront him when he came home that night. Instead, I asked, "Tough day?" He sighed dramatically, as if burdened by the weight of imaginary responsibilities. And I let him talk. Every lie he told became another thread in the web he didn't know he was spinning around himself. Days passed, and his excuses multiplied. Late meetings, forgotten plans, sudden calls from old colleagues. It was all too familiar, but this time I wasn't breaking down. I was observing like a detective at a crime scene. I noted everything: times, dates, tones, the smallest shifts in his routine. It was an obsession. It was evidence gathering, because if I was going to burn the illusion of his honesty, I wanted him to watch it crumble, piece by piece, just like he'd watched my trust collapse years ago. Then came the perfume. It was faint at first, a soft floral scent that didn't belong to me. I don't wear perfume that light. Mine's always bold, a statement. But this was delicate, fresh, like spring mornings and false innocence. It lingered on his shirt when he hugged me, and he didn't even realize it. I leaned into the embrace and inhaled, quietly marking the scent in my mind. The next morning, I found a long blonde hair on the passenger seat of his car. I don't have blonde hair. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I smiled again. That same calm smile he'd started to find unsettling. The proof wasn't just physical. It was digital too. His phone habits changed. Constant texting, sudden bursts of laughter at nothing, late-night screen glows that he turned away from me. He thought turning his phone face down was enough to hide his secrets. But he underestimated my memory. I knew every behavioral pattern he used to hide something because I'd seen it before. I didn't even need to snoop. The truth was revealing itself piece by piece. One night, I caught the reflection of his screen in the mirror behind him. A name flashed. Maya! My stomach didn't twist. My chest didn't ache. I'd already detached myself from the emotional weight. I just memorized the name and continued folding laundry, as if nothing had happened. Later that night, while he showered, I opened my laptop, searched the name, and found her. Public profile, tagged photos, shared moments that weren't supposed to exist. There he was, in the background of one, his hand on hers, smiling like the perfect boyfriend he was pretending to be with me. The caption read, "He always makes me feel special." The irony almost made me laugh. When he came out, towel around his waist, humming as if he didn't just spend the evening being someone else's lover, I handed him a folded shirt and said, "You left this in the car." His eyes flickered. Just a flicker, but enough. That tiny spark of panic was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't press further. I wanted him to think I was still blind, still forgiving. The more comfortable he felt, the deeper he'd dig his own hole. And he did. Over the next few weeks, his confidence grew. He stayed out later, became bolder with his excuses, even had the nerve to tell me he was proud of how strong I'd become. If only he knew what that strength was being used for. I had stopped being the victim of his betrayal a long time ago. Now I was the architect of his downfall. Every lie, every smirk, every careless text, I stored it away like ammunition. I wasn't going to explode in anger. I was going to detonate quietly, effectively, and precisely. The funny thing about liars is that they think they're smarter than everyone else. They think they can keep juggling truths and lies without dropping any. But the more lies you tell, the heavier they get, and I could see the strain starting to show. He became restless, nervous, defensive at random questions. "You don't trust me, do you?" he'd ask. I'd smile and say, "Of course I do." And that terrified him more than any accusation could have. Because deep down, he knew he didn't deserve trust. And nothing unsettles a liar more than someone who stays calm when they expect chaos. There were moments when he looked at me longer than usual, like he was trying to figure out if I knew. Maybe he sensed something, a shift in my energy, the quiet precision in my tone. But he never dared to ask directly. He didn't want to hear the truth from me, because the truth would have meant the end of his illusion. And I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction yet. Not until everything was perfectly in place. The more cracks appeared, the closer I felt to my own peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was focused. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't born from rage. It's born from clarity. It's not about destroying someone with force. It's about watching them unravel under the weight of their own lies. I didn't need to expose him yet. I just needed to wait. Because the thing about masks is, they don't stay on forever. Eventually they slip. And when his did, I'd be right there. Not to shout, not to cry, but to smile, as the truth finally devoured the illusion he worked so hard to protect. I did what he least expected. I loved him harder. Not out of affection, not out of forgiveness, but out of precision. I made him breakfast the way he liked it. 2 eggs, slightly runny, a sprinkle of black pepper. I packed his lunch for work and slipped small handwritten notes inside. Little things that said, "You make me proud," or "I'm lucky to have you." He'd find them, text me a heart, and I'd smile back like I still believed in him. It wasn't love anymore. It was theater, and every gesture was part of my performance. I went back to being the girlfriend he used to brag about. I laughed at his jokes, no matter how dull they become. I asked about his day, nodded at his stories, complimented his efforts, even when I knew half of them were built on lies. I made sure my tone was warm, my eyes soft, my energy calm. Because that's how you disarm a liar. Not by attacking, but by embracing. They mistake your calm for weakness, your affection for amnesia, and he did exactly that. He started to relax again. The tension in his shoulders disappeared. The paranoia in his eyes faded. He'd walk around humming, confident that I'd finally moved on from the past. I could see it in the way he talked to his friends. That puffed up tone of pride only cheaters wear when they think they've earned forgiveness. He'd tell them, "She finally forgave me. We're stronger than ever." They'd pat his back, congratulate him, and I'd just smile in the background, quietly amused by the irony. Because while he celebrated his victory, I was counting down to his fall. Every lie he spoke, I recorded. Every suspicious text, I screenshot. Every inconsistent story I wrote down. I became meticulous. There was a notebook in my drawer filled with dates, times, and details. Who he was with, what excuse he gave, what really happened. I even learned to read between his lies. The little tells he didn't realize he had. The twitch of his jaw when he was nervous. The way his thumb rubbed his ring finger when he lied. Those were signals. Breadcrumbs leading me closer to the truth he thought he'd buried. I started keeping digital folders too. Backups, timestamps, even recordings when necessary. I wasn't obsessed. I was preparing. Revenge wasn't going to be messy this time. It was going to be clean, calculated, and undeniable. He had used charm and deception to manipulate the narrative once before, but this time, I'd own the story. This time, I'd have proof strong enough to make his lies crumble like dust. What he didn't know was that my forgiveness wasn't peace. It was poison, slow, sweet, and deliberate. I knew he'd grow confident under its influence. I knew he'd lower his guard. That's the thing about manipulators. They crave control, and when they think they've regained it, that's when they're most exposed. He believed he was winning me back. In truth, he was walking straight into the story I was rewriting. A story where I was no longer the broken one. At dinner with friends, he'd reach for my hand, tell everyone how grateful he was that we'd survived the storm. I'd smile, squeeze his hand back, and play along. Let them see the perfect couple. Let them believe in his redemption. Because when the truth came out, it would sting sharper. The higher he climbed on the illusion of being the changed man, the harder his fall would be. And I wasn't rushing it. I wanted him to feel completely safe first. The kind of safety that makes you forget consequences even exist. I even made him believe I trusted him again. I'd say things like, "I'm glad we're past all that," or "I really believe in you this time." The words tasted like ash, but I said them convincingly enough for him to believe every syllable. He started sharing plans about our future again. Talked about trips, maybe even a proposal down the line. He said, "I'm thinking of something special for us." I smiled and said, "I can't wait," while my mind whispered, "You have no idea what's coming." There were moments when I almost pitied him. Almost, because there's something tragic about watching someone so proud, so sure of his cleverness, not realizing that his downfall is being built by the very person sitting beside him. But pity doesn't erase damage. It doesn't rebuild trust. It only fuels the clarity that comes after the pain. The kind that teaches you not to react, but to plan. And my plan was simple. Let him keep playing his game while I played mine better. He wanted to look like the perfect boyfriend in public? Fine. I'd help him maintain that image until the day I took it away from him completely. I made sure every photo, every appearance, every interaction painted us as the picture of happiness. People loved that story. The redemption arc. The miracle of forgiveness. But miracles are fragile, and I knew exactly when and how to break this one. Behind closed doors, my focus sharpened. I backed up every file, hid every copy in places he'd never think to look. I started reaching out subtly, reconnecting with old friends, people he had wronged or used, weaving small conversations to confirm what I already knew. I wasn't gossiping. I was gathering context, allies and clarity. If I was going to expose him, it had to be unshakable. Something he couldn't twist or deny. And through it all, I never raised my voice. I never accused. I never gave him a reason to see me as a threat. He thought my kindness was his victory. He mistook my patience for love. He looked at me and saw the same girl he once deceived. Soft, forgiving, easy to fool. He didn't realize I'd evolved past emotion into calculation. He didn't realize that every gentle smile was a countdown. Every act of affection was a carefully measured step toward his undoing. I stopped being angry a long time ago. Anger burns fast and blinds you. But focus builds empires. Focus destroys reputations quietly, with elegance. My forgiveness wasn't real. It was the calm before his ruin. And while he was busy, playing perfect boyfriend for the world, I was quietly preparing the day when everyone would see what he truly was. Because revenge isn't about rage. It's about patience, timing, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing the storm that's coming. is one they created themselves. He said he was going out with the boys, and I smiled like I always did. My voice didn't tremble, my hands didn't shake. I had practiced this calm for weeks. He looked so sure of himself, so comfortable in the lie. "Don't wait up," he said, with that smirk he used whenever he thought he was being clever. I told him I wouldn't, kissed his cheek lightly, and watched him walk out the door. The moment it closed, I exhaled, not from pain, but from clarity, because I already knew where he was going, who he was meeting, and what he was planning to do. I had seen the text earlier that day. The words were burned into my mind. "Can't wait to see you tonight." And his reply, "Same here. I'll tell her I'm with the guys." There was something almost pathetic about how predictable he had become. The same lines, the same excuses, the same patterns. Once upon a time, I'd cry over these things. I'd question myself, wondering what I did wrong. But not this time. This time, I wasn't the fool. I was the observer. I waited 15 minutes after he left, then grabbed my keys and followed. The night air was cold, sharp against my face, but I didn't feel it. My heartbeat was steady, my mind clear. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about truth. He drove to a quiet part of town. Not too far, but far enough to think he was safe. The restaurant he chose was dimly lit, tucked between old buildings, where people mind their own business, perfect for secrets. I parked a block away, blending into the shadows, watching as he stepped out of the car, checked his reflection in the window, and fixed his collar. He wasn't meeting the boys. He was meeting her. She arrived moments later. The same woman I'd seen before. The one who'd been just a friend. She wore a red dress that caught the light of passing cars. Her smile wide and confident. They greeted each other like lovers, not friends. He pulled her in for a quick embrace, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just a strange stillness. It's a strange thing when your fears become facts. It doesn't hurt as much as you'd think. It just confirms what you already knew. I watched from across the street as they sat together. Their laughter floated through the window, soft and intimate. He leaned in close, whispering something that made her giggle and touch his hand. I could read their body language, like a script I'd already seen. The gentle touches, the lingering looks, the comfortable rhythm of deceit. I remembered how he used to look at me like that, how I once mistook that look for love. Now I saw it for what it was. Performance. I lifted my phone and hit record. My hands didn't shake. The camera captured everything. The smiles, the touches, the betrayal unfolding in real time. Proof. That's all I needed now. Proof, not emotion. There was power in that quiet documentation. The same man who once accused me of being paranoid would soon have to face the truth I'd caught on camera. After a few minutes, I stopped recording and sat back. Watching them felt less like spying and more like witnessing the end of a chapter. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, soft and deliberate. It shows itself not in grand confessions, but in the little things. A tilted phone, a half smile, a changed password. He had no idea that his every move had already written his downfall. He thought he was clever, that he could juggle lies forever. But lies have a way of rotting from the inside, and his were already crumbling. I stayed long enough to see him reach for her hand. That was all I needed. I turned away, walked to my car, and drove off into the night. The city lights blurred by my window, as if the world outside was moving faster than the thoughts inside my head. I wasn't thinking about him. I was thinking about what came next. Because now, the game had changed. At a red light, I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I expected to see pain, maybe a hint of tears, but instead, I saw control. The kind of calm that only comes when you've stopped being a victim. My reflection didn't look like someone broken. It looked like someone calculating. For the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. When I got home, I didn't text him. Didn't call, didn't confront. I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch, and replayed the video. There he was, laughing, leaning in, pretending to be someone else. It almost made me laugh. The man who once swore he'd changed, now caught so effortlessly in the same trap he built himself. I took a slow sip and whispered to the empty room, "You really thought I'd never find out, didn't you?" I remembered the first time he betrayed me, how it destroyed me, how I lost myself trying to understand why. This time, it was different. This time, I wasn't destroyed. I was detached. There's a certain freedom in losing all expectations from someone. Once you stop expecting honesty, you stop being disappointed. I sat there for hours, not sad, not angry, just still, because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't going to react right away. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg. I was going to wait. Let him believe everything was normal. Let him dig deeper into his lies. Let him think he'd gotten away with it. Because revenge doesn't work when it's loud. It works when it's silent. By the time I went to bed, I had already made my decision. Tomorrow, I would act like nothing happened. I would smile, listen to his fake stories and nod along. Because the best revenge isn't confrontation. It's control. And now, I had it completely. As I closed my eyes, I didn't dream of him or her. I dreamed of the moment he would finally realize what I already knew. The moment when his lies would turn on him. When the mask would crack completely. He thought he had fooled me again. But what he didn't realize was that I had already written the ending to this story. And in that ending, I win. That night, I didn't confront him. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, no tears staining the floor. I just sat there for a while after he left, listening to the echo of his car fading into the night. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, sharp, deliberate. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The screen's glow painted the room cold blue. And that's when it began. My quiet act of revenge. Not out of rage, but out of purpose. I started collecting everything. Every message, every call log, every tiny detail that painted the truth he thought he'd buried. I opened old conversations, scrolling past his empty apologies, his promises, his declarations of never again. I screenshot each one. Each message was a brick, and I was building a wall he'd never climb. I found the photos he'd hidden in cloud storage, the ones he probably thought were deleted forever. There she was, smiling, carefree, leaning close to him in ways that told me everything words couldn't. I didn't flinch. I simply saved them, renamed the files with dates, and dragged them into a neatly labeled folder called Truth. But this wasn't chaos. This was organization. Meticulous, calculated, surgical. I wasn't gathering evidence to confront him emotionally. I was creating a story no one could deny. I built a timeline, date by date, message by message, lie by lie. I paired screenshots with receipts, cross-referenced locations with excuses. I even matched his so-called late-night meetings with GPS data he didn't know synced to his shared accounts. He had built his lies with arrogance, never realizing arrogance leaves trails, and I was following every one of them. By the time the clock hit 2 a.m., the folder was nearly complete, a chronicle of deceit dressed as devotion. I leaned back in my chair and looked at what I'd created, not out of pride, but out of clarity. This was no longer about heartbreak. It was about closure, not the kind that comes from his apology, but the kind that comes when truth stands taller than his deception. I wasn't angry. I was focused. The kind of focus that comes when pain has run out and only precision remains. I didn't send anything. Not yet. Timing is everything in revenge. The impatient ruin their own plans. I would wait. Not days, but weeks if I had to. Because I wanted him to feel safe again. I wanted him to think he'd won. I wanted him to let his guard down completely, so that when the truth finally came for him, it would dismantle everything he'd rebuilt. Not just his reputation, but his illusion of control. Around 3 a.m, I heard his car pull into the driveway. I quickly closed my laptop, left the mug in the sink, and sat on the couch like I'd been waiting up for him. He came in looking exhausted, but relieved, wearing that fake smile that used to melt me. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "I love you." The words brushed past my skin, but didn't reach my heart. I looked at him, really looked, and realized I didn't love him anymore. The woman who once crumbled for those 3 words no longer existed. What I loved now was the silence before his downfall. That still, perfect quiet before the truth finally erupts. He sat beside me, pretending to care, pretending to be honest. I matched his act flawlessly. I asked about his night, laughed in all the right places, touched his arm like everything was normal. It was easy, almost too easy. Pretending to forgive had become second nature. But this time, forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was camouflage. The more he believed in my softness, the sharper my plan became. Over the next few days, I continued perfecting the story. I wrote it like a documentary. Clean, chronological, factual. I had text logs showing his lies, photos proving his betrayal, voice notes that exposed his manipulation. I made sure everything was cross-checked and undeniable. I uploaded it all to a private drive, backed it up twice, even stored a copy on a USB drive in my car's glove compartment. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about readiness. Every night, he'd come home and act like the perfect partner. He'd cook dinner, talk about the future, hold my hand on the couch while we watched TV. I'd smile, laugh, play the role I'd perfected. But every word he spoke just became another note in my mental file. Another reminder of how convincingly he could lie. Sometimes, I'd catch myself watching him the way a scientist observes a specimen. Detached, curious, methodical. He didn't know it yet, but every moment of peace he felt was the calm before the storm he'd created. There were moments where part of me wanted to end it right there, to throw the evidence on the table and watch him squirm. But no, that would be mercy, and mercy was something he'd never earned. I wanted him to feel the slow unraveling, the creeping realization that his world wasn't collapsing suddenly, but piece by piece, like a structure decaying quietly, until one day, it simply caves in. One night, while he slept beside me, I stared at him, peaceful, unaware, vulnerable. I thought about how many nights I'd cried while he slept soundly like this. And now, here he was, dreaming, while his entire facade sat neatly documented in my possession. It was poetic in a way, justice dressed in silence. I reached over, brushed a stray hair from his forehead, and smiled faintly. He had no idea that the countdown had already begun. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment he thought he got away with. It was all leading to one inevitable ending. And I was the one writing it, not him, not fate, me. When morning came, I woke up before him, brewed coffee, and went on with my day as if nothing had changed. But everything had, because the plan was already in motion, invisible, and unstoppable. He thought my quietness meant forgiveness. He didn't realize it meant preparation. That night had taught me something powerful. Sometimes revenge isn't fire and fury. Sometimes it's calm, calculated, and patient. It's a woman sitting quietly with proof in her hands, waiting for the perfect moment to let the truth speak for itself. And when that moment comes, it won't be loud or dramatic. It'll be silent, cold, and absolute. The morning after I sent the email, I woke up to silence that felt almost sacred. The kind of silence that follows a storm, where the air still smells of rain and broken things. My phone sat on the bedside table, flashing notifications I didn't bother to read. I already knew what they were. Messages from him, from people who once adored him. Maybe even a few who wanted to confirm if what I'd exposed was true. But truth doesn't need confirmation. It stands on its own, steady and merciless. I made coffee like it was any other day, moving through the kitchen with an ease I hadn't felt in months. For once, my hands didn't shake when I lifted the mug. The world outside looked ordinary, but inside, everything had shifted. Somewhere across the city, he was living through the collapse of the illusion he had built. I could imagine it. The frantic calls, the deleted messages, the explanations that came too late. Every sound of his downfall echoed like distant thunder, faint but satisfying. By the time I finally opened my phone, his name filled the screen. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that switched from shock to begging to blame. The pattern was predictable. Denial first, then pleading, then anger. He had always underestimated me, always believed he could talk his way out of anything. But words couldn't save him this time. The evidence didn't bend to charm. The screenshots, the videos, the timestamps. They spoke louder than his rehearsed apologies ever could. I imagined the moment he realized how deep I had gone, how much I had collected, the moment he saw that it wasn't just a burst of emotional revenge, but something meticulous, deliberate, surgical. The same patience I once used to love him had turned into the weapon that dismantled him. Each message, each lie, each calculated manipulation he'd thrown my way had become part of the case against him. I hadn't needed to add a single exaggerated word. I had let his own actions tell the story. By noon, I knew the news had spread. A mutual friend texted me just one word. Wow, no judgment, no sympathy, just that. I smiled faintly, because I understood what it meant. The story had reached the right ears. People were talking. His image, the one he'd built so carefully. The perfect boyfriend, the loyal friend, the charming colleague, was cracking under the weight of his own deceit. And the best part was, I didn't have to do anything more. The truth was self-sustaining now. It had momentum. I didn't block him. I wanted him to feel the weight of being ignored, to hear the silence on the other end of the line. He called once more around evening, and I let it ring until it stopped. When the voicemail came through, I played it, not out of curiosity, but closure. His voice was different, softer, stripped of its confidence. He didn't yell or threaten. He just said my name, slow and broken, followed by a quiet, "Please." I didn't mean for it to go this far. It almost made me laugh, because that's what betrayal always sounds like when it's caught. Regret, wrapped in disbelief. Later, I checked his social media. The comments on his latest post had turned from admiration to confusion, then silence. His profile picture was gone. The captions that once screamed happiness now looked like lies frozen in time. People had stopped engaging. The crowd that once fed his ego had disappeared. It was all so poetic, watching his digital kingdom crumble without me saying a single extra word. I logged out after that, feeling no thrill, no gloating, just peace. In the days that followed, I saw him once, by accident, or maybe he came looking for me. He was standing near the cafe we used to visit, wearing the same jacket that once smelled of another woman's perfume. But now he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. His shoulders sagged. His eyes searched for someone to believe him. When he saw me, he froze, guilt written all over his face. I held his gaze for a second, and then looked away, walked past him like he was a stranger. And in that moment, I realized true revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, elegant, final. It's when they realize they no longer have access to your emotions. He didn't follow me that day. He knew it was over. Not just the relationship, but his power. The version of me he could manipulate had died long before that morning. What stood before him now was someone he couldn't touch. Not with words, not with tears, not with excuses. I had built my freedom out of his lies, brick by brick, and there was no doorway left open for him to walk through. By the end of the week, I heard from a friend that he'd taken time off work. Stress, they said. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. Everyone faces the consequences of their choices eventually. He had his turn. And me, I was free. The weight I'd carried for so long. The doubt, the humiliation, the constant fear of being lied to again. It had dissolved into nothing. The silence I once dreaded had become my favorite sound. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like tiny, untouchable stars. I thought about how easy it would have been to forgive him again, to fall back into that endless cycle of promises and apologies. But forgiveness, I had learned, only means something when it's deserved. He had mistaken it for permission. Permission to betray again, to repeat the same pattern. I'd let him think he was safe, and that was his downfall. I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like a reset button for the soul. My revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about restoring balance, about making sure he never used someone's kindness as a weapon again. The emails, the exposure, the silence. It had all been necessary, and now that it was done, I didn't need to look back. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. He had spent months crafting lies, building a version of himself that fooled everyone. I spent weeks crafting the truth. The difference between us was simple. I didn't hide behind it. I let the truth stand, unedited and undeniable. And when it finally tore his world apart, I realized I didn't just win. I reclaimed myself. I finished my coffee, closed my eyes, and smiled faintly to the rhythm of the city outside. He might recover someday, patch up what he can, pretend to be someone new, but he'll always know that once, when he thought he was untouchable, I was the one who ended his illusion. Revenge wasn't the fire that burned him. It was the mirror that made him see himself clearly, for the first time. Days slipped by quietly, one blending into another, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't wake up with that familiar knot in my chest. The chaos had finally ended. There were no more arguments to prepare for, no more lies to decode, no more pretending that everything was fine, when deep down I knew it wasn't. I didn't realize how exhausting it had been to live in constant alertness, to love someone who turned trust into a guessing game. But now there was nothing left to guess. The truth had already been revealed, exposed, and burned clean through the last thread that held us together. What was left was silence. Thick, steady, and strangely comforting. He tried, of course. They always do. The messages came first. Long, wordy paragraphs, filled with excuses and self-pity. He said he made mistakes because he was scared to lose me. He said the other woman meant nothing, that he'd been confused, lost, stupid. Each word was a recycled line from a script he'd used before. Then came the gifts. Flowers on my doorstep, expensive chocolates I didn't touch, and a card that said, "You'll always be my home." I stared at that line for a long time, realizing how twisted it sounded. I wasn't his home. I was the house he burned down and expected to rebuild for him. When he realized that words and gifts weren't working, he tried tears, fake at first, then desperate. He called from unknown numbers, sent mutual friends to plead his case, even stood outside my apartment once, waiting for me to come out. But I didn't. I stayed inside, lights off, watching the outline of his figure through the curtains. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger or fear. I felt nothing, just a deep, still quiet. I had already walked away long before my feet carried me out of that relationship. The rest was just noise. I didn't block him immediately. I wanted him to feel the weight of my silence. Because silence, when given by someone who used to care deeply, is deafening. It says everything words can't. He wanted me to fight, to yell, to show that I still cared. But I didn't. My peace became his punishment. Every unanswered call, every seen but unreplied message was another reminder that his access to me had expired. Weeks passed. The chaos he brought into my life began to fade, like a bad dream I could barely remember. I started doing small things again. The things I had stopped because of him. Reading before bed, going out alone without checking my phone, sitting by the window at night just to listen to the city breathe. Healing didn't come with fireworks or grand moments of clarity. It came slowly, quietly, in the way I started choosing myself again every day. Every once in a while, I'd see him online. His social media had gone quiet. The man who once flaunted his perfect life was now posting quotes about loss and redemption. His captions had shifted from arrogance to melancholy. I didn't feel satisfaction when I saw that. Just peace, because the kind of emptiness he was feeling, the kind born from losing something real, was its own kind of justice. Mutual friends told me he wasn't the same anymore. He regrets everything, they said. But regret isn't transformation. Regret is what people feel when they're forced to face the consequences they thought they could avoid. I didn't need his regret. I didn't even need his apology anymore. I had already forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't mean welcoming someone back. Sometimes it means quietly closing the door and never opening it again. I stopped checking his updates after a while. The truth was, I didn't care. He could have vanished completely, and I wouldn't have noticed. I wasn't avoiding him out of pain. I was simply indifferent. That's the real end of love. Not hatred, not bitterness, but indifference. The kind where you look at their name and feel absolutely nothing. One evening, I walked by a restaurant we used to go to. The same place where he'd once made promises under soft lights, pretending to mean every word. I paused for a second, half expecting the old ache to return. But it didn't. I just smiled faintly and kept walking. The memories were still there, but they no longer hurt. They had lost their power over me. A few weeks later, he sent one final message, just a short one this time. I hope you're happy. I've lost everything. I stared at it for a moment, not with pity, but with understanding. He was right. He had lost everything. Not because I took it away, but because he threw it away when he chose deceit over honesty. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Some stories don't need an ending conversation. Silence becomes the punctuation. In the quiet that followed, I realized that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the acceptance of what happened and the decision to stop reliving it. I no longer needed revenge, closure, or explanations. I had all the answers I needed. The silence I once feared had become my sanctuary. Life slowly returned to normal. Or maybe something even better than normal. My laughter came back, not forced, but genuine. My morning started with gratitude instead of anxiety. I stopped checking my phone obsessively. I stopped wondering what he was doing or who he was with. I stopped caring about the why. Instead, I started caring about myself, my dreams, my peace, my future. And that's when I understood something profound. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's just the calm after the storm. The sound of your own breathing when you finally realize you survived. I didn't need him to hurt. I didn't need him to see how strong I'd become. My silence was proof enough. Now when I look back, I don't see betrayal or heartbreak. I see transformation. I see a version of myself that refused to stay broken. The storm had come and gone, and it had taken a lot with it. Pain, fear, illusions. But it also left behind clarity. The clarity that I didn't lose him. He lost me, and in the end, that was enough. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full of strength, wisdom, and peace. The silence after the storm wasn't about loneliness. It was freedom. Looking back, it's strange how peace can grow from chaos. How something that once tore you apart can eventually teach you to breathe again. For the longest time, I thought forgiveness meant weakness, a sign that you'd given up, that you'd surrendered your worth to the one who betrayed you. But now, I see it differently. Forgiveness isn't surrender, it's power. It's a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout or prove anything. It's the ability to look at someone who shattered you and say, "You no longer have control over my story." That's what I learned in the aftermath of everything. That true revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclaiming your peace and refusing to let their chaos define you any longer. When I first forgave him, it wasn't because he deserved it. He didn't. He never even tried to earn it. He was still the same man who lied, who manipulated, who acted like he could twist every situation in his favor. But forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. Carrying anger was like dragging his ghost everywhere I went. I was tired of being haunted by something that wasn't even alive anymore. So I let it go, slowly, painfully, deliberately. I didn't do it all at once. Forgiveness came in fragments. In the moments when I stopped replaying his words in my head, when I stopped wondering if he'd ever feel the same pain I did, when I stopped wishing for a different ending. At first, silence felt strange. I was used to reacting, to defending myself, to trying to make him understand how deeply he'd hurt me. But one day I realized he didn't care to understand. And that was the day I stopped explaining. My silence became my shield. Every time he reached out, pretending to be sorry, trying to manipulate me into another round of his performance, I stayed quiet. I didn't block him. I didn't argue. I just didn't respond. And that silence drove him mad. Because people like him feed off your emotions, your anger, your sadness, your need to be heard. When you take that away, you take everything from them. That was my real revenge. Not the exposure, not the evidence, not the chaos I unleashed, but the calm that followed. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't mean you forget. I remember every detail. The messages, the lies, the betrayal that unfolded piece by piece like a cruel play. But those memories don't sting anymore. They've become lessons, reminders of what I'll never accept again. I used to look back and wonder why I wasn't enough, why he chose deceit over honesty. Now I realize it was never about me. Some people lie because truth terrifies them. Some betray because loyalty feels like a cage. Forgiveness was me finally seeing that his choices were a reflection of who he was, not of what I lacked. There's something incredibly liberating about letting karma do the work. You don't have to plan it, force it, or even witness it. It happens naturally. I didn't have to ruin him. He did that himself. I just stepped out of the way and watched from afar as his carefully constructed image fell apart. And when people finally saw him for who he really was, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt peace. The kind of peace that comes when you know justice has its own timing. Some nights, I'd catch myself scrolling past his profile, seeing how empty his world looked now. No grand gestures, no fake smiles, no audience to perform for, just silence. The same silence he once tried to fill with lies. He used to say that I was too forgiving, too patient, too soft for this world. He mistook gentleness for weakness. He thought calmness meant surrender. But what he didn't understand was that forgiveness is not softness. It's strength in its purest form. It takes strength to hold your head high when you have every reason to scream. It takes strength to smile when you could destroy someone with a single sentence. It takes strength to walk away when your ego begs you to stay and fight. And that strength scared him, because he couldn't manipulate calmness. He couldn't control forgiveness. He could handle anger. He knew how to argue, how to twist words until you doubted yourself. But forgiveness, that was something he didn't have power over. I've come to realize that life has a way of restoring balance. Even when it feels like everything's unfair, The universe doesn't forget. It listens, it observes, it responds. Sometimes slowly, but always surely. The things people do in the dark eventually come into the light. And when they do, it's never as dramatic as you imagine. It's quiet, subtle. It just happens. One day, he woke up and found himself alone. The people who once cheered for him no longer believed his stories. The woman he betrayed me with was gone. His charm, his confidence, his fake perfection. All of it faded. Not because I destroyed it, but because it was never real to begin with. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a gift you give the other person. It's a gift you give yourself. It's choosing peace over chaos, growth over grudges, clarity over confusion. It's not about letting them win. It's about making sure they can never pull you back into their storm again. When I finally forgave him, I didn't say it out loud. There was no dramatic conversation, no closure scene, no tears. I just looked in the mirror one morning and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no hatred, just stillness. That was the moment I knew I was free. And if I could speak to anyone who's been betrayed, I'd tell them this. Don't waste your energy trying to destroy the person who hurt you. Let them destroy themselves. They always do. Focus on rebuilding yourself instead. Because the greatest revenge isn't making them fall. It's rising so high, they can never reach you again. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the calm after the war. It's standing in the ruins of everything that tried to break you and realizing you're still here. Stronger, softer, wiser. It's smiling when they expect you to crumble, walking away when they expect you to fight. Because sometimes, the coldest and most beautiful revenge is simply peace.